Philosophers.
Fauxlosophers.
All right, well, this is the first time we're doing something a little new. We are live streaming our show in concurrency with recording it. Concurrency?
We're live streaming concurrently with our recording.
Yes, we are live streaming concurrently with our recording. Yeah, I like to make up words to sound smart. So this will be, just a little something extra for those who have the time and want to be a part of the discussion, maybe comment along as we go. So today's topic is called The Price of Progress. The subtitle is Examining Correlations of Societal Decline, Possible Correlations with Societal Decline with Economic and Technological Prosperity, as not to beg the question, It's just, I think this is something that a lot of people hear about, and it's discussed a lot today. It's, the more technology we have, the more we are pulled apart and the lonelier we are. Like, the anti-social media, you hear a lot of stuff like that,
It's the damn kids and their video games.
Right, the kids and their video games, and how video games are causing violence, and pretty much as we become more and more what we would call first world, and the more the basic needs, well, not even just the basic needs, but the basic desires on top of that are kind of sated, we start falling apart as a society. David, where do you think that really, do you have an idea of where maybe that kind of sentiment comes from, or do you have any speculations?
The sentiment that we have societal decline as technology improves, I think, is something that's existed for a long time, because there are records of people being worried about the way that society is going since forever. I think there's even records about that all the way back to the ancient Greeks, about being concerned about the kids and their newfangled writing.
These new pottery lessons are not the old way.
So things like that.
A good example,
specifically related to technology.
Well, a good example, I think, actually from history, just not to cut your thunder off too much, but back when people started to try to come up with a unified time system and say, okay, what if we put, we all agree that there's this concept of time. It's a human observation. Why don't we marcate it? And it's interesting because most places in the world operate, actually every place in the world nowadays operates on the 12 to 20, the 24-hour day, the 60-minute hour, and the 60-second minute. That's pretty universal. Much more universal than, for example, distances and weights, because there's still the imperial system and the metric system.
You mean the American system at this point?
Well, the freedom system and the other system. Whichever one, I can't remember, put people on the moon. Anyway, but all jokes aside, back when there was a time before clocks, obviously, and even before then, there was a time before people lived by a sense of time, where you wouldn't say, meet me at this place at 4 o'clock. You would say, meet me at this place today, or meet me at this place after lunch. And people just culturally ate at certain times of the day, and you just kind of roughly knew when that was. The sun's been up for about yay long, or the sun is about this high in the sky. Noon is an ancient concept. The sun is in the middle of the sky. Meet me at that time. That's something that everyone can observe. Or meet me at dawn or dusk. But that's about it. Those are judging the angle of the sun in the sky from beyond that is kind of difficult, just with no tools.
Meet me at 40 degrees.
Meet me at 40 degrees. Yeah, right. But that 40 degrees changes with the time of the year, and people lived by, I forget the name of it, but they had a name for that type of time. And so, but anyway, back when people were discussing the idea of let's convert to like a universal time system, there were philosophers who wrote about how this was criminal and wrong against nature. And literally the quote I remember is, these people taking my day and cutting it into tiny pieces. Even though you're not changing the length of a day, you're just marking it. People complained about moving to a universal time system because now there's kind of this imposed concept of being late and early and scheduled and what we would call civilized. Today, that was a very commonly fought against notion at its time, you know. So that's kind of the old school version of these kids in their video games is these kids in their time.
Well, and there's something to be said about that because, you know, there are things to be observed about the additional stress that, you know, punctuality can, or lack thereof, can induce.
Right. Well, and then there are plenty of papers today, you know, talking about how woke it is not to go by clock time because, well, I mean, it's not just being woke about it. A lot of people, when they go on vacation, for instance, talk about leaving all technology. Like now it's a fad to not go by clock time. Just eat when you're hungry.
I spent my weekend in the woods without my smartphone.
But more importantly, it's I woke up when I woke up. I ate when I was hungry, and I went to bed when I was tired, which is how we've done things forever, you know. But that's a foreign concept to people now, especially those who attend public schooling institutions or just schooling institutions in general. From the time you're 5 years old, it is just imprinted on you that you have to be here at the same time. There's a schedule laid out for you.
Be here before the bell rings. And you may things change when the bell rings on a schedule.
Right, and then as they're teaching you when the bell is ringing, which is on an hour or a set period of time, it becomes your second nature. Kind of like walking on, I don't know about you, but like walking on the right side of the hallway, because that's actually preparing you for driving on the right side of the road. I didn't know that was something that was different in different countries, but places where you drive on the left side of the road, for instance, when you line up in a classroom to walk out into the hallway when you're 5 in a line, because they make you be orderly, you get on the right side of the hallway to walk, because it mirrors how everything else works in society. It's just a mini society where you're not punished as harshly and try to learn essentially what society's unspoken rules are. You know, be here at this time. Being punctual isn't necessarily something that's taught verbatim. It's something that's imprinted, or even, I guess technically it's an indoctrination on how to behave a certain way.
Right, and you learn very early on to condemn those who are not punctual, not because you've been taught to, but because, you know, maybe you got held up from something because they were late.
Right. Well, and even when you're a child, you see people being punished. Tardiness, you know, that's a bad word. You know, it doesn't even sound good. You're late. It's bad. You know, and there's definitely a difference across cultures as to what's acceptable in terms of being early and late. I mean, you hear it all the time where, you know, Americans who think they know what European cultures are like and think that it's just all one culture say that it's rude to be early. Well, in some places, that's definitely true. It is rude to show up before, but it's more rude to show up before than it is to show up after. In the United States, it's typically, especially in the professional world, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. That's kind of the unspoken rule in some places. You know, you need to be here in advance, and which means you need to leave even further in advance, because what if there is something to hold you up? You're still held accountable to that. And then you look at an extreme example like Japan, whose metro system is famous for being on time and actually hands out slips for employees to give to their employers when they are 2 to 3 minutes late because of the train. You know, like that's insane to think about, but being punctual there, it's not about being early or late. It's you need to be on time, you know. And there's just cultural differences surrounding that, but that's a technology. It's not commonly thought of that way, but that kind of is a technology. You know, it's a tool that we use, because time as it's perceived by human beings in this way is a human construct. It's not like there's a cosmic force that says a minute has to be 60 seconds. We just agreed that was the length of time.
What does it mean for it to be 6:17 p.m.?
Exactly, you know. Now we have found ways to tie these seemingly at the time they were created arbitrary values to universal constants. For example, how quickly you can actually just say we could change our entire time system to how quickly it takes light to travel a distance and to travel a set distance, and that it traveling that set distance is what we call a second. Or I think what we use now is how is the frequency that something propagates in a vacuum, that a certain wavelength of light propagates in a vacuum or something like that.
Frequency?
Yeah, the number of times it oscillates, X number of oscillations is a second in a vacuum or something like that. Because certain, like for instance,
I wasn't aware that light changes frequency.
Well, okay, certain
that way.
electromagnetic waves will travel. I
They
can't
travel at different speeds through different media.
right, but this isn't a
And they
vacuum.
travel at maximum speed in a vacuum.
Right, so when okay, that's what it is. It's frequency in a vacuum, I think. I can't remember exactly, but it's things like that. We tie it to something that exists in nature that is presumed to be consistent everywhere, universally. But that's not. We didn't start there when time was created. We just said it's this, and that's what it is. You know, very much so as a kilogram was whatever this little dumbbell weighs. And we made a bunch of very, very close copies at the time, and we just distributed them to an agency. What was it? It was the Standards. I forget what it was. It was the Royal Standards Society or something like that.
Talking about SI?
Yeah,
No, SI is just the system.
right. There's the institute behind it that maintains standards. I forget the name of the. It's probably something really obvious, but I can't remember exactly what it is.
The SI Institute.
Yes, the SI stands for Standards Institute.
No, it doesn't.
I know, but still, like we just all that they worked because we all just agreed that this is what we're gonna do. Very similar to driving on the left side of the right side of the road. Either is fine
As long as everybody agrees.
as long as everybody agrees, and that's what makes it a technology or more or less a tool for
More
our
like,
use.
well, it's more of a system.
It is more of a system.
Because technology is a bit more objective than that.
Fair enough, but even then, in the same way we talk about technology, there were people saying this will be harmful to society. Now, I think most people, I say that, I have no idea actually, I would contend that time is a good thing. Like our common understanding of time is a good thing. It allows us to do things that it allows us to coordinate on a much larger scale than we would have before.
And with much greater precision.
Exactly.
I want to know when I need to be at this terminal in the airport so the plane does not leave without me.
Right. Well, and this plane needs to have a way of saying, I need to fill up with these people going to this destination. So I need a way of getting them all here at the same time. Well, the same time. Getting them here
Simultaneously.
yes. So that's part of it. But I feel like what most people are talking about when they talk about technological improvements is, especially in the last, I would say, century. Yeah. The last century, but even more so since the advent of the internet, is technology is allowing us to essentially exercise very ancient human traits and activities in a different way. For example, since we're talking about societal decline specifically, we could walk around the definition of what a society is, but essentially it's just a group of people. That's what it is. And I mean, some philosophers will make the argument that anytime you get more than one person in the room, it's a society.
Right. The difference between a group and a society is the same as, between a hill and a mountain. It's completely arbitrary.
Exactly. So, for example, just talking, two humans communicating like we're doing right now, that's been around a very long time. But now I can do it over a great distance. Not only can I, and I've been able to do that over a great distance for a long time through writing, for example. Mail
right.
is
Now
the
you
first.
can talk over a great distance with very high fidelity, a lot more detail, in a lot less time.
Right, I can literally talk, not write a letter and have a conversation. I can talk in real time using speech, not dots and dashes like with the telegram. But like, I guess when the telephone first came out is when you first had this capability. You can, and this allows you to take full advantage of inflections, the patterns of speech that you use, not just the words.
Well, now we've taken it even a level further with cameras,
and we can
use body language.
Yes, and and once you've gotten that, there's really no higher level of bandwidth for human communication beyond body language, the words themselves, the inflections and tone. Once you have all of those things, that's pretty much the summation of the scope of what humans can use to communicate.
Right, beyond physical contact.
Beyond physical contact, exactly.
Which is, of course, impossible over a distance.
Well, you say that. There are people who have provided technological substitutions. There are some hilarious examples. I shan't go into it this time, but
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Those who don't know, just Google, ways people can touch over a distance, and then make sure you're not at work, because it's funny. I think that's about as vague as I can make it, and not get anybody in trouble. But you can, for example, there was this thing I saw that was developed by, there was some nonprofit that was designed for troops overseas, where they can essentially wear these sleeves on their arms and then manipulate a pair of arms somewhere else, so they could actually hug their kids in a weirdly disconnected way. And don't get me wrong, that's right on the other side of the uncanny valley, where it's just kind of weird, but it's not too weird yet. But it's still weird. It's not human enough to be convincing.
Yep.
But I mean, if it can get on the scale of the uncanny valley, there's, I think, a decent reason, without becoming technologically optimistic, that it can cross to the other side. It's amazing. Pair of arms passing the point comp test. Anyway, so we've discussed a couple of different areas in which technology has just kind of allowed us to do things that we've always been able to do in person, now just kind of remotely. That's one of them. Additionally, technology, I think, another broad scope of what it's done is allowed us to communicate with a wider variety of people. Anecdotally, my great-grandfather, who was in World War II, grew up in a township of 200 people, and that was like the county was 200 people. And you only knew those 200 people because most people didn't go anywhere else. He didn't leave home until he decided to go to Florida to pick oranges for a season to make some money. And he hitchhiked from there to Memphis, got on a train, and then went there. Got to wherever he was going in Florida, hailed a cab, and asked the cab driver, "Do you know where my family member that runs a farm down here lives?" Because he didn't even know where he lived, didn't contact them in advance, was just going to go down there and figured he'd do this because he heard about it one time. Fortunately, the cab driver knew where they lived, took him to his house, paid him, and then he met his family member that he had literally never seen in his life and said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so's son, so you're my blank cousin, whatever our relation is. Can I stay with you and pick oranges for a season?" Sure. That's a pretty extreme way to meet new people, that even your family too. But that's why he was able to do it, is because they were family. The family unit was very strong back then, because out of those 200 people you happen to live around, there's a close guarantee that, well, there's an obvious guarantee when you're a child most of the time that the first people you meet are your parents most of the time, unless you're an orphan, and then your siblings. And if you just look, and I'm talking, I guess this could be different for different societies, but at least in the United States, you lived with your parents and your siblings. Your grandparents probably lived in the house next door, not very far. Most people didn't move far away from family. And it's kind of interesting now too, because especially in the place where you and I live, there are roads that are named after the family. And it's because, if not now, not too long ago, every member of the family lived down that road. It was the great-grandparents' house, and then their kids had houses, and their kids' kids had houses off of that. But the whole road is named after that family's last name, and everyone lives down in this cul-de-sac together. So family was kind of a greater proportion of what society was to you, because that's typically who you live with when you grow up. And if there's no economic factors to move, why would you? You know? And even if there were economic factors to move, families move together a lot of the time as well. Nowadays, and then of course there were the people that, you know, your family has known for a long time that live in the same area. There's always like a handful of people that live in a small town. And this is where a majority of people lived, is rurally. You know, there were cities with large populations, but in comparison to the total population, the majority of people lived in situations like this, you know, at least in the United States. So your options for friends, for example, were extremely limited. Now I can meet somebody. I could probably meet anybody in the world with an internet connection. And I don't have to meet them based on the fact that we just happen to live close. That's not going to be the thing we share in common, most likely, is that we just happen to live near one another.
Probably a common interest of some sort.
Exactly. You know, and that's kind of where chat rooms cropped up first, was around topics. And they still kind of do. You know, subreddits are like that. You know, you meet people in subreddits based on and both of you voluntarily showed up because you each have an interest separately in this topic, and you can talk with people and make friends that way, which I think is interesting. And of course, there's those types of relationships are called into question sometimes because, you know, I don't know, I guess it may be leftovers from the time when you and I grew up, where we were taught to be very skeptical of people you meet on the internet, you know. So your friends in real life are always going to be superior to your friends on the net, supposedly. However, it does raise the question, is that always going to be the case, or should that be the case? You know, is there something intrinsically better about people you have met and seen with your own eyes, and perhaps even touched with your own hands in some other way, or had the ability to, that's different from people you may have met in a digital space?
Psychologically, probably.
Really?
Probably. I mean, you know, it could just be a remnant of upbringing, but there seems to me to be a different level of connection with those that you've met in person. And you know, I guess what I mean by psychologically is that people who suffer from depression as a result of social isolation generally do not find their ability to cope in their online friends, but rather those that are physically close.
I don't think, but I think what makes that more psychologically imprinting isn't the fact that you've seen them with your own eyes, though. It's shared experience. For example, some of my friends that I'm the most close to, even if I haven't spoken to them in a long time, are people that I have a wealth of shared experiences with. For example, there's the joke that's always made is, oh, your best friend is whoever the school randomly chose to sit next to you in kindergarten, kindergarten to third grade. You know, usually in that area, one of the people you just happen to sit next to, you became close friends with because you just sat next to them. And when you're young, your biases are much less than they are when they haven't developed yet. So you have no reason not to be friends with this person. Not only that, but forming friendships is a mutual bond. You will form biases around each other as you grow up together. You will always see that person in a slightly different light than you would have if you've met them as an adult and never had known them before. And that's something that you can't duplicate. My wife and I were talking about it because she was homeschooled. She had a very different experience than I did. And for her, as an adult, it's much more difficult to make friends with people because it's getting into that system, because she's always been around family. But most of the people that I've met in my life have come from school. Or I've met people through people I went to school with as an adult. And then there's work. But it's all about a shared experience. You know, when you feel like a person understands you because of an experience, and that's why I think you see one very common thing amongst those people is talking about people, especially like high school friends and younger, they reminisce a lot. And it's a way of them to kind of reaffirm their shared experience, almost like getting your story straight, but not because you're in trouble, but because having relived that memory when you discuss it with them is a way of kind of reliving a time spent with them. Now, I would argue that that is something that can be achieved virtually as well. It's just not as common because I don't think we've quite, well, I think we're getting close, but I don't think we've quite reached the threshold where people are spending enough time online to build enough experiences to build a decent friendship around. At least not everywhere.
It depends on what you're doing, I think. Because, if it's just people that you're, chatting with online, yeah, you're unlikely to have such a remarkable experience that is just going to imprint and make a memory. The most hilarious joke someone could ever tell is not going to form a memory. You just learned a new joke. But if you put in the context of people who, let's say, play online games together, now you have a thing that you're doing at the same time, and you do form memories about that.
Right. Well, and I don't know about you, but the first time I spoke over the internet to another person was playing online games. Because when I was young, Xbox Live Party Chat was where it was at. That's where, and I started out speaking to people that I had met in real life because we all wanted to play games together, but we quickly met other people. And I remember these people's names, and even into like my college years, another anecdote, the weirdest thing ever was meeting people that all played the same game together with my friends after I got the game. And this was when I was in college and I lived further away from my friends. And so this was like our way of kind of keeping in touch. Well, I met these other two guys through them. And it's strange because we played an MMO-like game together. So we lived life on a schedule. We would raid on certain nights, do this activity on certain nights, and I did nothing but go to school, work, and play games. I was single at the time, it was pretty pathetic, but that's what we did every night. And as we did this, I learned things about them, and then I followed them on social media, and it was weird to see, because all of my impressions of who these people were had come strictly through an experience I'd shared where I didn't rely on me seeing what they looked like. And then as soon as I followed, and like I knew what they did for a living, I knew like what their professions were, because we would all talk about work every so often, because like, yeah, work's been kicking my ass, and like, oh yeah, my boss is like this, and like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, normal banter. So I had this image built up in my head about who this person was, and then it's all just shifted in context because now I see a picture of this person and it's nothing like what I thought they were. One of them was a bodybuilder and I didn't know that. And so I just see this ripped bald guy and I'm like, that's not what I expected.
Sort of like radio personalities. When you finally see the radio talk show host that you've been listening to and it's nothing like what you thought that they look like, and you've put this picture in your head together just from a voice and like a personality, and that's it.
Exactly. Or when you're a kid before YouTube and you listen to a band that did not put themselves on their album art. Oh, I'll never forget when I saw Smash Mouth for the first time. Not what I expected. Anyway, we're straying pretty hard from this topic.
We are.
It's hard to stay on this one. But anecdotally, at the time, because it was also a good time too, because I was meeting these people online at the same time I was meeting people in school that I had classes with. And I quickly found that I developed closer friendships with these people that I had met only online, even though I spent just as much time in real life with these other folks. And the difference was what activities we were doing together. Because I was an engineering student and I hated myself, I associated negatively classmates with that experience, and we were all grinding together. And there was kind of a shared sense of camaraderie there, but I would only ever do things that I enjoyed with these other people. Now, I will say the one downside to digital or virtual friendships is, especially when they're formed around something like an activity like gaming, not everyone likes the same games, and those friendships can fall apart just as fast as they...
As soon as you lose interest in what was your common interest, then you stand a very good chance of splitting ways for a long time.
or indefinitely, and that's one thing that is a little more, that's different about friends that you grow up knowing in real life. You can't, it's usually around things that your interest is irrelevant. It's just, you have to do these things. Like in my case, I had to go to school. That's the biggest place, and friends you make that were coworkers, like you and I, we both showed up to work because we like to make money. And that was the reason we even started talking in the first place.
Wow, Joe, you showed up to work because you like to make money, you selfish...
I am. I'm not even going to lie about it. I told them in the interview, they're like, so why do you want this job? I'm like, because I like money and not starving. And so that's it.
I sincerely doubt you said this in your interview.
Well, I didn't say it exactly like that, but I did just straight up tell them I'm in this for the money. And when they asked me if you were offered more money to go elsewhere, I said probably. I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, who wouldn't? I feel like that's kind of a baity question. Like, no, I just happen to love the workflow and no, it's money. I'm here for the money. That's what it's about. Because that's a job.
Wow, you capitalist pig.
Yeah, that's me. So I guess one thing I would have to ask relating to the actual topic of this episode is, are those virtual friendships, for just as an example, are they degrading to a societal fabric?
No. Well, okay, not
by themselves, maybe, or
the existence of online friendships, I don't think degrades society, but there might be a case to be made about that as they become more and more prevalent, then it competes with personal friendships of people in physical proximity.
Which that's totally understandable how it can do that. You and your friends you have in real life are friends and have influenced each other's interests based on being around each other, but what's to keep you from forming a closer friendship? Like, you could go online. Like, I think we could take it to another level. Talk about online relationships.
Sure. Well, I guess the place where I was going to go with it, I was going to try to take it to an extreme, which is, there's nothing saying you can't have a deeper relationship of whatever sort with somebody online. I don't think I could say that. What I could say is, what I brought up earlier about, there seems to be something psychologically important about proximity in cases of coping with life problems. You need somebody to
physically be there,
literally be there. And so if you build your life up, or if a hypothetical person, builds their life up, making mostly online friends, and given the way that things work, you can only keep up with so much at a time. Your physically close friends begin to kind of fall away and go their own ways because you're each doing your own thing. Then, if you have a real problem, then you end up with what seems to you to be nobody to turn to about it, and this can lead down, sort of a road to madness.
Well, yeah, that's why people get married. I'm just going to throw that out there. That's a different topic for a different time, but I firmly believe that's one of the reasons we form, maybe not monogamous relationships, but we form relationships like that.
Yes.
Long-term companionship, where it's like, it's a guarantee. Well, like the anecdote I usually give for that is, if I were offered a high-paying job, if I could offer double my salary tomorrow in a city 1,000 miles away, it would be inappropriate for me to ask any of my friends to move there with me. But it's not inappropriate to expect your spouse to.
Sure. So,
for example.
Yeah, you have a point there. Okay, we'll take this to a different place. Then not everybody can get a spouse.
That's true.
And one of the reasons for this might be, and I am kind of sort of related to somebody who is in this situation, of that the social skills that are learned from physical relationships are not learned through online relationships. And so people who grow up making online friendships primarily can grow up to be socially inept and are unable to make friends, and start physical relationships, which could even have the possibility of leading to a marriage.
That is interesting. You know what I think we really need to do? Because I don't think either of us are totally in that space. I would be interested to find somebody, not to judge or not to be harsh to them, but out of genuine curiosity, whose best friends are people they've only ever known online. Or even if they've met them online and they spend a majority of their time online, but they maybe have met in person a couple times, like I'd be fine with that too. Because I really would want to know their perspective on it as well, because it's kind of hard to put yourself in those shoes. I mean, I've had online friends, but I've always had IRL friends as well. It's hard to imagine otherwise.
I think we're just a little bit too old to stand a high chance of us or people our age to fall into that category.
I think that is mostly true, but I think it also depends on, there are other factors. For example, we grew up in a fairly rural area. Like our entire state we live in is pretty rural. So what we consider to be the time when everyone got decent enough internet to like do things like that may be different for someone who lives in an area that's had internet, maybe a internet capable of doing those things that was readily available to the general public maybe a decade before. Maybe not a decade, but maybe half a decade before, 5 years or so. And for example, there may be people who live in countries right now that they can't even fathom the situation we were in because they don't even have internet now, because internet is still not universal. And that's another interesting thing, is how if there is problems associated with this that can be traced to this kind of thing, it's watching how they are asynchronously applied across civilizations. And I think that's one thing that gets talked about a lot as well, because the concept of the first world problem, that meme, that it's a thing, and it's due to the asynchronous application of technology. I think, okay, let's, since we're running a little low on time. Yeah. I just kind of want to touch on maybe other areas that we might be able to expand on in our next episode about, we've talked mainly about social technologies, ways to chat, ways to text chat, things like IRC, that level. There's voice chat, like things on Mumble, Discord, and then there's all the way up to full-on video chatting that is available pretty readily now. And I'm assuming at some point there'll be holo chatting. That'd be interesting. We haven't gotten there yet. But what other areas?
You mean that VR chat is not an accurate representation?
There's some problems associated with that as well. Particularly that no one is themselves in VR chat. No one scans themselves in to be their own avatar. Everyone picks something different because it's A, usually easier to encode, and B, if you could be anybody, why be yourself? There's that.
You're
contention.
a narcissist. That's why.
You're a narcissist. Well, to that credit, I was gonna say I'd be myself in VR chat, so I guess I am a narcissist. Oh man, I have a picture in my wallet of all the things that I love. It's just a picture of me holding some money. Capitalist pig. But are there any other general scopes of areas that you think would be interesting to talk about in a future episode where technology may be pulling at social fabrics? There's the social one of interpersonal relationships, but I think there's also the way just societies at large communicate, well, the dynamic between the individual and the just scope of everyone else, For example, if I wanted to just address, we talked about this last week, I think it's what kind of led us to this topic. If I just wanted to address everyone in my vicinity, I had to go to a place and still wouldn't catch everybody. And they still had to be roughly in my vicinity. Or you would have to be elevated in terms of popularity, whether it be like public office or through something else you're doing, like being in Hollywood or something like that, or being a music person who's being in an industry that relies on your popularity as a way of you monetizing and making an income. You had to do something like that, or you had to be a politician. Now, anyone can hashtag something and send it to the millions of people on Twitter every day, or with the chance of them seeing it. And now there's like, there's that, I think, level, which is where a lot of discussions around how technology makes us worse as a society, that's where a lot of those are central around. And I also think there is the scope of, definitely the scope of automation as far as its effect on jobs. Generally, when people start talking about populism, they start talking about how the automation threat to the economy is destroying the social fabric because people only are able to essentially function in a society when everyone has a job. That's a weird contention that I don't want to immediately dismiss, because I do think there's maybe a nugget of truth in there that needs to be sifted out from all of the rest of the garbage, but I'm not sure. I think that's worth a conversation.
To go along with that, something a little bit more vague, fear that comes with the technology that's being created and has been created in the past century.
Right. Well, and our patron, he had mentioned how technology affects our privacy as well, for example. And that's a good point. The term surveillance state is a relatively new term, but it's not just the surveillance state.
There's an interesting dynamic there with fear as well, because people are afraid of the surveillance state, but the surveillance state is only allowed to exist because of fear of other things.
Right. Well, and also, the thing about there being a surveillance state, what good is a surveillance state if you can't then broadcast that surveillance? Well, that broadcast half of a surveillance state is just as much of a tool that can be used. Like, for example, how many times have you seen it lately? I mean, I don't go around looking for people who get in trouble with the police, but nowadays it's standard protocol that if you're stopped by the police, you whip your phone out and start filming it. It's a defensive, it's a tool that its application can be good or bad, but it is a tool I say is good because it gives you the ability to essentially have, it's not the fact that you can record it that's powerful, it's that I have a distribution network via the internet that I can show what's about to happen.
The entire world could potentially see what you're about to do.
Right, so
don't make it interesting.
Yeah, or you think really hard about, are you in the right for doing it? And the term optics, that's a whole new concept of, it's not just what you're doing, it's the perspective that's gleaned from it. I don't know if there is I think there's probably also a topic on technology making obsolete some skills that humans have commonly had that people have thought were basic and that everyone should have. One of the easiest ones I can think of is spelling and basic math. Thanks to autocorrect, you don't have to know how to spell really well anymore, or even,
You only have to know the difference between the ones that autocorrect can't figure out for you.
Pretty much. But at least it narrows the scope of all possible spellings of a word down to a handful of options. But basic math. I need to know what a 15% tip on what I'm about to order is. Well, in the olden days, you would just do it, or they would print it on the receipt for you sometimes. But if you didn't know, it's pretty easy to take 15% of anything. I was taught the trick of take 5 and take 10%, which is just moving the decimal place one place, and then take half of that and add it to it, and that's what it is. That's just the easiest way to do it in my head before I was taught formal mathematics. But now most people don't even know how to do it on the calculator. They get a tip calculator and they just punch the value in and then punch 15% in. They don't even know how to go to the calculator and figure out what it is.
This is deeply troubling.
It is troubling, or for example, a discount calculator. Like if you're in a store, and for those who don't live in the United States, one of the weirdest things we do apparently to foreigners is that we don't pre-calculate taxes on anything. So whatever you see as the price is the store's price, and then the tax is added at the register. It's not on the ticket for you. You don't know till you get there. But most people just kind of estimate it up in their head, and it's not even done mathematically. I just know people who, If it's something in the $10 and less range, they just add roughly 25 cents, even though that's way overestimating. But if it's in the $10 to $100 range, they add like $5 to the price. And then beyond that, if you're buying anything over $1,000, you usually have another $100 in reserve for the taxes, and then up, which is fascinating. But if you're in a store that says, hey, 40% off, they have a discount calculator. They don't even know how to they don't know how to calculate 60% of a price. Or they may not even know that 40% off is 60% of the total value. So that instead of having to get it, even if they did know how to, in their calculator, get in, type the amount in, multiply it times 0.4 to get 40%, and then subtract it from the total, they'll do that. They don't know that you can just multiply the total times 0.6 and get the shortcut to the direct value, for example. And that's mind-blowing to me that's very basic arithmetic, but we don't have to do that. You don't have to know how to do that. There's an app for that, Cooking. Most people don't know how to cook. And I don't mean how to follow instructions, because there's a difference. If there's anything I've learned from watching way too many hours of Gordon Ramsay cooking shows, which are addicting for some reason.
It's that you have no idea what you're doing in the kitchen?
Well, it's not that I have no idea what I'm doing in the kitchen, but there is a difference between looking at a recipe, following the recipe, and making the thing. Like if you can't do that, no app in the world can help you. Takeout's an option. But there's a difference between knowing how to put something together from a recipe and knowing why those ingredients together can make a thing. Like, most people who can cook, they just know,
does this need a little bit more garlic?
Does it need more garlic? Or if I'm making bread, I don't need to know it's 4 cups of flour to 2 cups of water. They know why those ratios are important and can just, as they're making it, know what's needed. It's a skill. You have to practice this, many times to know what is needed. That's a pretty basic skill. Wow. God. And then there are the things that you're required by law to do. Your taxes, which then again, there might be a slightly different complaint there that laws are too complicated, and that if your average citizen has to hire a lawyer to convert themselves every day in just the common law, if there's a problem, that's probably a different thing. But yeah, other technological things like that. Self-driving cars might make it to where knowing how to manually drive a vehicle, in the same way that going from a manual transmission vehicle to an automatic transmission, some people scoff at that, but most people said that was a good thing. Now that's one less thing I have to learn to be able to operate something that is considered normal. Well, what if knowing how to drive is no longer considered normal? Which in some places it isn't. Places with public transit, that's a different solution to the same problem. But if I had a self-driving car, why would I need to learn how to drive when most of the time I don't? And there are always the people who say it's better to be prepared. You should know more than what you expect to need every day, just in case. But in the world where the minimum of things that you would need to know then to successfully function is getting higher and higher because of technology.
Well, right. Well, and you could take that line of thinking to an extreme. I don't know how to fly a plane or a helicopter. It might be useful to know how to fly those. It should the very unlikely situation in which I would need to fly one of those should arise. But why though?
Right. Well, I think there's I don't know. That's not, I guess, considered something that is a common enough occurrence for you. But it might be if you're a person that flies a lot, it's hard to evaluate. There's a personal evaluation.
If you're the type of person who goes on flights for business a lot,
like weekly maybe, or bi-weekly.
If there's a medical emergency and the pilot is suddenly disabled, it is helpful to have somebody else on board the plane who knows how to take control of the craft in an emergency.
Right. But this also kind of conflicts with the notion that makes societies great, is that we can all specialize and get better at that thing. Then where's the balance? And I think technology definitely it plays on that factor a lot, is how technology allows people to go beyond what is considered the bare minimum. Like, you can drop the bare minimum to a point where there really isn't a bare minimum. As long as you can breathe and operate a cell phone or smartphone, you can do anything that is asked of the average person. But are we getting the same return on investment? Are people then using that time to further specialize into an area that they couldn't have before?
Or are they using it to be lazy and not learn anything?
Or is it worth it? Is that harmful to society? We call it lazy, but I mean, in reality, laziness has done more for the desire to be lazy has done far more for humanity than...
Correct. So, yeah, I guess what I mean, are they being genuinely lazy? I don't want to do work. Or are they saying, I don't want to waste my time on this easy work?
Right. All the way to the point, and to what we, I guess, talked about last time. I don't know if it was last time or the last couple times, one of the last episodes, which is, or maybe we haven't talked about this at all, getting to the point where nobody has to work.
No, we haven't talked about that.
Okay. But that's another problem, because all of these problems are kind of, the fears of all these problems are projected into that future of a post-scarcity society, where it's not only that you don't have to work, but that you're unemployable anywhere, and that anything you do is not going to be for money, because why would anyone pay you for anything when they can get...
You are inferior to the technology.
Right. And I think the fear from that is rooted in the problems we're talking about now, is that what affects on us as a human race... What effect does technology have on us as a human race? And if it's going to be so bad in that future, then are we seeing the symptoms of it now? It's almost begging the question in that way is, well, a post-scarcity society will be terrible, and you can already tell because of what's happening right now. And it's looking at that projection and then backwards examining and trying to find symptoms instead of looking at symptoms now and then projecting them into the future, maybe, is what the problem is. Either way, we've extended our time, and we need to wrap this up. But I do think all we've done today is open up worm cans instead of closing anything. But it's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah, I think we've come up with some subtopics to branch off on now.
Definitely. And whenever we go back and re-listen to this, I'll be sure to jot them down, because I wasn't doing it as we were going along, because I'm bad.
Are you lazy?
I mean, that's what made us great, apparently. So with that being said... Fauxlosophers.